Hello and welcome dolls to another episode of Explaining 1960s Fashion. Today let's take a trip, let's travel far out and let me explain to you the space craze and space age. During the 1950s and 60s, the fascination for space took the world by storm. What started as a competition for the first man on the moon became a cultural phenomenon. From books to movies, from interior design to children's books and of course fashion. Space themes were soon seen everywhere. And for about a decade, the space craze shaped art and the lives of many. So let's take it back to the beginning. Let me explain to you space craze, what it was, where it came from, and why it was so influential. After World War II, the Cold War sparked a competition between East and West, mainly the US and the UdSSR, that soon translated to everything that could be turned into a competition. From sports to the arms race to, of course, the space race. The space race sparked what can be defined as the space craze of the late 1950s and 1960s, which ultimately impacted several areas of American lives. And so the space age, which was also known as the atomic age, was born. The start of the space craze can be linked to October of 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 into space, causing an instant media sensation and sending a great sense of fear for several Americans. With Sputnik circling around the Earth and the launch of Sputnik 2, many Americans became increasingly fearful that the United States were lagging behind the Soviet Union. The space craze in America grew rapidly into an obsession after April 9th in 1959, when NASA revealed its Project Mercury astronauts and heavily relied on the mass media to promote their images. After 1959, NASA devoted a large effort to fully publicizing these astronauts to the American nation, placing the space race and its astronauts center stage throughout the 1960s. Life magazine brought the Mercury 7 into the living rooms and coffee table of many Americans, detailing the personal stories of these astronauts that reflected the image NASA was trying to produce. The space race climaxed in 1969 when the US sent the first man to the moon, giving many Americans the feeling of winning the space race. However, for many, space age wasn't too much about the actual space race, and way more about its impact on pop culture and fashion. After people had become fascinated with outer space and sci-fi in the 1950s, the 1960s saw new trends progressing. It revolved around the idea of exploration, of pushing boundaries further than even before, whether that meant with materials or silhouettes. It truly felt new and exciting because the future everyone imagined of flying cars and the moon seemed so far yet so near at the same time. So let's dive into the wonderful and strange world of space age fashion. Inspired by the unknown and alien concept, space age fashion can be characterized by its abstract shapes, geometric bright accents of color, and so-called trompe-l'oeil hemlines. These were optical illusions that often gave the clothing and its silhouette a three-dimensional effect. A lot of new materials like vinyl and plastic details became popular, often styled with large oversized sunglasses and clean-cut hats. The main focus of the space age look revolved around the makeup, the clothes, and the accessories. Eyes were, like so often with 60s looks, the main feature and highlighted. Heavily done mascara eyes, bold eyeliners, adorned with bold, shiny, and metallic eyeshadow marked the look. Fancy decoration inspired by clothes or accessories was done around the eyes, like little sequins or a little disc which enhanced the makeup. Lips were done in pastel pink shade, with the color sometimes subdued due to the extravagant eye makeup look. Space Age's white and silver color scheme were worn with astronaut-style accessories, like flat boots called gogo boots, goggles and helmets, as well as shiny gloves. This time period in fashion was mainly shaped by three popular designers from Europe: Paco Rabanne, Pierre Cardin, and André Courreges. French designer André Courreges was born in 1923. After first being an Air Force pilot, he started working for Cristobal Balenciaga in 1945. In 1961, he founded his own fashion house and soon became known for his extremely simple, geometric and modern designs. Especially popular among the mods, his clothes would soon be worn all over Europe. Controversy over who created the idea of the miniskirts revolves around André Courreges and Marie Quant. Courreges explicitly claimed to have invented it, accusing his London rival Marie Quant of merely commercializing it after he had presented short skirts in his collections as early as the mid-1960s. In 1964, he launched what he'd later be most popular for, the Space Age look. His Moon Girl collection included white go-go boots and tall, spherical hats that he debuted in the spring of 1964. He used high-shine PVC to construct stiff A-line skirts that held their own when twisted and contorted in fashion shoots, chin-strapped space bonnets, flat ankle boots, and sleek, plastic-like tech fabric typified the Space Age look as women readied themselves for a new sartorial stratosphere. His dresses, suits, and trouser suits might be fitted, semi-fitted, or tubular, but they presented a bold graphic and geometric silhouette. His fabrics were flat, tailored wools, more unimaginably than what ready-to-wear fashion was adopting. He preferred a restricted palette of monochromes and pastels, and was partial to aggressive checks and stripes. Courrèges also used white a great deal. When he introduced the space look in the spring of 1964, his collection included go-go boots. Go-go boots eventually became a staple of go-go girl fashion in the 1960s. The boots were defined by their fluorescent colors, shiny material, and sequins. The go-go boots were one of the items that presented in the collection and became one of the must-have items for go-go girls during the 60s. Another popular designer was Italian-born Pietro Costante Cardin. Born in July of 1922, his parents fled to France in 1924. Changing his name to Pierre Cardin, he showed an interest in dressmaking as early as his childhood. First working for Elsa Schiaparelli, he became the head of Christian Dior's tailleur atelier in 1947, but was denied work at Balenciaga. He designed streetwear collections with a combined of an avant-garde approach. His famous Space Age looks are the helmet, short tunics, and goggles. His shapes might resemble floral abstractions that devoured conventional clothing dimensions. His enormous collars and frequent use of vinyl evoked outer space gear. Pierre Cardin was already fashioning dresses from white leather and plastic discs. In 1966, the Cosmos collection included wool-shift mini dresses with huge cutouts. The short knitted dresses, worn with warm tights, were easy to move around in, even though the helmets that went with them might have hindered freedom of movement a little bit. Cardin was a pioneer of Space Age fashion, crafting sharp, modernist silhouettes from shimmering lame fabrics. His futuristic designs have been worn by the likes of 60s style icons like Mia Farrow and the Beatles. Another big name in the Space Age fashion, Paco Rabanne, pushed Space Age fashion toward wearable art. Born in Spain in 1934, named Francisco Rabanne Cuervo, he rose to prominence as an enfant terrible of the fashion world in the 1960s. With his use of unconventional materials such as metal and plastics in his clothing, and for his incorporation of futuristic elements in his designs, gaining notoriety for his Space Age style. For him, the new and ultimate frontier of fashion had become the finding of new materials. His investigation of plastic and other hardware proclaimed a new epoch of clothes, so intricately constructed that they could stand on their own. Paco Rabanne created his signature metallic chainmail dress, which gained a lot of fame and popularity, and is honestly one of the 60s pieces I would most love to own. His extreme look caught on commercially in the form of chain-link belts, heavy metal necklaces, and disc-like earrings. His metallic dress was eye-catching but impractical. It was made of discs or metal, which were joined together with metal hoops. They looked great, but apparently the discs could easily nip your skin, cut you with their sharp edges, or just be unpleasantly cold. Rabanne's now notorious chainmail creations made his models look like extraterrestrial warriors dressed in body armor that was equal parts 1960th century knight and futuristic dancer. Alongside Jacques Fonternay, he designed the costumes for Barbarella, a sci-fi film starring Jane Fonda and Anita Pallenberg. Barbarella was one of many movies bringing the peace craze to the big screen in the 1960s. Sci-fi had been popular before, but the 1960s set the scene for its popularity to skyrocket. The continually newsworthy story of the 1960s was, of course, space travel. At the dawn of the decade, commercial satellites were being made available, while at its close, man was actually on the moon. It was the ultimate paradigm for technological advance, science fiction becoming science reality. That inspired many artists, especially the movie scene was soon flooded with dystopian and comedic science fiction. Most known are the 1968 classic 2001: A Space Odyssey, and TV shows like Out of the Unknown. A pop culture favorite is 1968's Barbarella. Starring Jane Fonda and Anita Pallenberg, it perfectly captures 1960s space age. From the costumes to the set design, this movie is a 1960s space age time capsule. In the mid to late 1960s, space themes were seen everywhere, in toys, advertisements, and music. Space age pop was an emergent music genre, also known as bachelor pad music. It drew on contemporary fascination with technology, outer space, and exotic locations, exploring new audio technology such as stereographic sounds, multi-track recording, and early electronical instruments. But even bands making music in other genres drew inspiration from space. Songs like Across the Universe by the Beatles and the music of Pink Floyd have space-related themes and lyrics. For many, Pink Floyd is synonymous with space rock, and in 1988 they became the first band to play music in space, when their music was the chosen soundtrack for the crew of the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz TM-7. Even though they often empathize that most of their songs aren't in fact inspired by a fascination of space, their sound and music is often seen so. Space age was also influential to the interior design of the time. Space age furniture was infused with modern personality that transformed any living space. Imagine gazing up the sky, filled with spacecraft, satellites, and stars and planets. These key elements inspired the trend. Each detail immersed you in the atmosphere reminiscent of a Stanley Kubrick film. Unlike rustic homes characterized by wood and stone, space-age designs embraced colorful plastics, reflective metals for futuristic appeal. Furniture shapes also played a crucial role in creating an incredible and elegant ambience. For instance, furniture corners softened into smooth, curved, irresistibly captivating lines. Beyond rounded edges, spherical shapes dominated space-age designs. You'll notice this shape pretty much everywhere, from chandeliers to tables and chairs and doorways. This design motive is inspired by scientific achievements during the space age, where the atom became a recurring inspiration, as seen in the atomium, a symbol of Brussels. Angular shapes reminiscent of spaceships, rockets, and stylized stars are common in space-age design, contrasting the rounded forms. Even though space-age fashion wasn't worn too much on the street, it was mostly seen in film and on a fashion runway, it was a reflection of a time filled with euphoria for space and intergalactic adventures. Nowadays often referred to as retro-futurism, space age seems so modern yet nostalgic at the same time. A perfect blend of a time long gone and one yet to come. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment down below telling me which of these space age designers was your favorite, if there's anything you would like to add, and just your overall thoughts. I have been fascinated by space age for what feels like an eternity now. It was one of the first things that really caught my eye when I got into the 1960s. I'm a big fan of science fiction movies like Barbarella and A Space Odyssey, and I just have to say that I feel like this was such a small sub-trend that is still referenced to this day, and one that I truly love. Also leave a comment about all the other fashion genres and subcultures of the 1960s you would like me to cover. I'm working on the list, I'm working on all of your recommendations, but I just love to read what you're interested in. I want to thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye everybody!